Hey, thanks for joining another Barrel Proof Baseball podcast. Today we're joined by Tim Piersant, the founder of Chattanooga Whiskey Distillery. Tim, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, if you wouldn't mind, kind of talk a little bit about yourself, maybe in a non-whiskey way. Like, what are you into outside of whiskey? Before we hit that one.
Music was a big part of my life for a long time, and I still try to play as much as I can, but I don't play any gigs anymore. I guess much larger than that would be my wife and kids. So I got a family at home, and we live in downtown Chattanooga, and I was born and raised in Chattanooga, and my parents are still here. I've got an older brother that's here. And sports were a big part of our life. As I was mentioning before we hopped on here, baseball was a big part of our life, and as well as other sports. And yeah, man, it's just, I guess, a little bit of everything. I enjoy all types of hobbies. Try to mountain bike when I can, and because Chattanooga is an amazing outdoor town with lots of trails, and it's a big climbing destination. I never really got into climbing though. And anyways, so yeah, that's a little bit of everything.
Nice, man. So your story, your history is incredible. And I know we could probably go really into detail about it, but going back to like wanting to start up Chattanooga Whiskey, and it's basically you're starting it in a town where it's illegal to distill it.
Right.
And given the fact, pre-prohibition, it was a huge distilling community. And, since prohibition, it's not been legal. So can you talk a little bit about, the legal battle that you had to go through, your Facebook ad, kind of getting it going, and how that thing got started?
Yeah, so essentially started the company on Facebook, and in 2011 when it was illegal to distill. And there were a lot of questions about it online. There were a lot of locals that were asking about it. We started it like we were bringing whiskey back to Chattanooga for the first time in 100 years. But we also asked a question, and that is, would you drink it? Would you drink Chattanooga whiskey? And it was a resounding yes. And so then it was about finding out why it was illegal, why it wasn't here, why it hasn't been here since prohibition, since before prohibition. So while we were digging, we also were putting all the parts together to release Chattanooga whiskey that was not made in Chattanooga, because you could source. So we sourced from MGP. It was LDI before MGP, so it was actually LDI when we sourced from them. Lawrenceburg Distillers, for anyone that doesn't know. And we sourced. We got our glass that we wanted. We had a local graphic designer do a label for us, and just put all the pieces together to launch this thing locally, and also simultaneously lobby to discover what the laws were, and then lobby to change them. So it really started as just a local kind of city county process, step by step, and individual conversations. We had a law firm that was doing pro bono work for us because locally it was exciting. There were a lot of people asking questions. Seemed like kind of the beginning of a snowball effect. And the local news picked us up, and local newspaper, and it just kind of got bigger, and the questions got bigger, and our movement got louder. And then really to really push it through, we created a campaign called the Vote Whiskey campaign, because we felt like our backs were up against the wall with our local legislation and our county commissioners. We were not confident that they were going to vote it through. We sought an opinion from the Tennessee State Attorney General that was not even favorable, that it was a local law. He really turned it into a state law. So after we had done all this lobbying locally, we ended up having to turn our attention to the state, form new state bills, and so we kept the Vote Whiskey campaign. The campaign we created was Vote Whiskey. We kept it going from a local level to a state level. It was just my co-founder and I. And we ended up having to have a vote locally from the county commissioners, and it was and we got a super majority. Although the day of, we weren't sure we were going to get a majority at all, but we had so many people show up. We had hundreds of locals show up at the county courthouse in support of this thing that it really just pushed it over the edge. And but they couldn't just pass a bill right there to distill. They basically were letting the state know that they were behind us, and that they approved it. They would approve it if it were passed. And so we ended up forming state bills, and yeah, and then it was basically we started the company in October 2011, and it took us until May of 2013 for the bills to go through. And it was a fight, but they went through, and it changed distilling for the rest of the state of Tennessee. There's 95 counties in Tennessee. Prior to 2013, in 2009, there was a bill that went through that allowed a few counties to distill, namely Nashville's county, which was Davidson, and but other, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Memphis, and a lot of other counties. Most counties couldn't until our bill went through in 2013, and then we took us another 2 years to build our first distillery in 2015. But the distilling scene kind of exploded in Tennessee after that 2013 bill. There's been a lot of distilleries to pop up, more than 30 now. And there's a Tennessee Whiskey Trail that was formed out of the Tennessee Distillers Guild, and it's been an exciting road that kind of was spawned from that 2013 passage. So.
That's got to be a huge undertaking to try and change laws locally in a town that's, since what, 1920, 1915, that they didn't allow.
1915 here, yeah.
So, I mean, you got to imagine getting some lawyers, even doing pro bono work, would be a little difficult in town to take on those laws that have been around for so long.
Chattanooga is a pretty progressive town, even though it's a small to mid-size southeastern town in Tennessee. It's pretty progressive. From a legislative perspective, maybe not so much, but from a community perspective, it is. And it's old historic manufacturing, and Chattanooga is an old historic manufacturing town, so it's kind of right back where it belongs. Yeah. And then of course we were still, in 2011, 2012, we were not far removed from the recession, and jobs were important. And so, we coined it as a jobs bill.
That's cool. So there's a perk other than just being able to distill whiskey there, get some community in there, and make some money, and hopefully it's beneficial for everybody. That's pretty cool. Right. One of the cool things I think is about whiskey in general, especially bourbon, is just the significance. There's a huge historical significance, and there's names and things that have been around for so long. And so I found it really interesting, and about the House Bill 102, yep, and the significance of the 102 throughout your branding and moving forward with the number 102. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, 102 years since Prohibition, when we opened. We opened the experimental distillery in 2015. That was exactly 100 years from Prohibition. It took us an additional 2 years because we make straight bourbon whiskey, so it had to be aged for greater than 2 years. So it took us another 2 years to come out with our the first real made Chattanooga whiskey since 1915. We have all of our experimental batches, unless it's like a liqueur or a single barrel. All of our experimental batches are proofed to 102 proof to honor that. And of course, House Bill 102. So
you mentioned your experimental batches. So you kind of talk about, you've got two distilleries, right?
Yep.
So there's one that's purely experimental, and then the other one's got your 91 and 111 plus some experimental. Can you kind of explain the difference there?
Yeah. So when we built the experimental distillery in 2015, we utilized that as a roadmap to our future 100% Chattanooga made whiskey that would replace the LDI whiskey. And so every week we would put away a new recipe, and we've continued that. It was within a framework, and the framework was the utilization of specialty malts in bourbon specifically. So from 2015 to 2017, we put away over 100 different unique recipes 100 different barrels, utilizing over 100 different specialty malts across those 100 barrels. And we're able to select our flagship when we built our Chattanooga Whiskey Riverfront headquarters. So the Chattanooga Whiskey Riverfront headquarters was established in March of 2017, exactly 2 years after we established the experimental distillery. We went into our barrel cellar, and the team combed through those 100 plus recipes, those 100 plus barrels, and selected barrel number 91 as our favorite to scale up to Riverfront and replace 1816, which was the LDI 3-grain bourbon. And in that process, that 2-year process, we also coined and trademarked our own style of straight bourbon whiskey called Tennessee High Malt. So the barrel 91 Tennessee High Malt recipe that we selected was a 4-grain bourbon that had 3 select specialty malts in it. And it was non-GMO yellow corn, malted rye, caramel malted barley, and honey malted barley. The reason we selected it was because we felt like it was the best combination of a classic traditional bourbon and combined with the deep, rich, complex profile that we were searching for with the addition of all the specialty malts.
So is that the reasoning behind the 91 proof?
It is the 91st.
Okay.
Yep.
There's always some sort of significance behind everything. It's pretty cool.
I'm glad you noticed.
I did. Yeah. I picked up on that one, but I noticed also even on the bottle, you talk about kind of the malt forward, profile that you're going for. Is that something that's definitely like unique to bourbon, or even the amount that you're going with and adding a 4th grain? I mean, how did that come about, and how is that more, unique to what you guys are trying to do?
Yeah, well, Grant's background, Grant McCracken is our head distiller. He came on right at the beginning of the construction process of the experimental distillery, and he really loved our history, our short history of changing laws. Saw the opportunity to really do something different in the industry, in the whiskey industry, and because he was a head distiller for a prominent brewery and was head of R&D. His experience in working with specialty malts was far and above what any other distillers was, and so he really pushed me to continue to push the envelope in making our own unique recipe, but our own unique flavor profile, and was confident that specialty malts in bourbon whiskey was the way to go. So most of the recipes we did were 4-grain of those 100. But we explored all kinds of specialty malts. And really the mission was just a bolder, richer bourbon. Like, that was our mission. Of course, we wanted it to be approachable. And that's why we have one at 91 proof. That's why we have one at 111 proof. I say approachable, I mean, like, kind of, you got your easy sipper, and then you got your big, bold, kind of creamy
robust
mouth. Yeah. And so yeah, that the 4 grains, again, it's just most of what we did. It was really about the utilization of specialty malts driving a specific kind of darker, roastier, toastier flavor profile that we were after.
Gotcha. It's super interesting, like when that specialty that like people put on their own bourbon, their own whiskey that they want to make. I mean, it's cool that it doesn't seem like there's a lot of brands that are going with the 4th grain and going with as high of malt by anybody.
No, there's not. I mean, you'll see 4 grains are, I feel like 4 grains are increasingly popular from a craft perspective, but because craft whiskey doesn't always get the best rap, it's the 4 grain doesn't necessarily either, but it's just all about recipe and approach. And I mean, we spent years developing this recipe, so it wasn't like we were like, hey, we just really want a 4 grain bourbon. I mean, we were going after a specific taste profile, and I think that's why in our case it's worked as well as it has.
And there's obviously Tennessee whiskeys, as people think about it, thinking about like the Lincoln County process and charcoal filtering. Is there a reason why you didn't do that? Is that more to distinguish yourself as a bourbon and not necessarily a Tennessee whiskey?
Yeah, that's exactly why.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were not interested in the charcoal filtration process because we were going after a bolder flavor bourbon, and the charcoal filtration processes would tame that down,
Mhm.
and bourbon was our history. The LDI bourbon was our history, and so we didn't want to. We went, I guess, decently far away from that, but we didn't want to leave it in the dust because we wanted an approachable bourbon at the end of the day.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yep.
And you guys typically go with a longer fermentation process too, right? 7-day versus like a typical 3-day.
Yeah, that's right.
And then is that what is that? What's that going to bring out differently in the whiskey?
So it really, what it does is there's not as much, there's not, the yeast isn't as loud. The yeast esterification isn't as loud as it is in a 3 or 4 day to 6% ABV. We go, 7 days to 10% ABV. So it celebrates the mash bill a lot more. And it really helps with the richness and complexity. And that's why we take the extra time. The louder yeast kind of covers up a lot of your mash bill flavor profile, and so it's a craft brewing tactic that Grant implemented that I think has been one of the many steps that we've taken that have proven to be the difference maker.
One of the things I heard you talk about that I thought was really cool was really putting all the effort into making good beer, before
Yeah.
making good, distilling it to good whiskey.
Yep.
I think that's pretty cool. Like knowing that the process that's going in, and the amount of attention that's being put into just the process of making the good beer, and not necessarily just having the end goal in mind, but knowing that process is going to make the end goal really good.
Yep.
I think it's pretty
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
The Solera barrel, can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so a traditional Solera barrel they're stacked barrels, and stacked like a pyramid. Ours is one large Solera barrel vat, and it is white oak. It is charred on the inside. It has the same elements, as really the same properties as a 53-gallon barrel. It does not go into the Solera barrel until it's fully matured in a 53-gallon barrel. So it's really a finishing. It's more than an aging. And it holds, our Solera barrel holds 100 barrels approximately. And when we load in, we load 8 to 10 barrels in. When we load out, we went to bottle, it's 8 to 10 barrels. So you're always topping it up, and you can never perfectly extract a barrel out of it once it goes in. So you're always leaving nuances of every barrel behind, creating greater complexity, and also improving with consistency from batch to batch as well.
How long do they stay in the Solera barrels?
It's all based on supply and demand.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the thing about Solera barrel is once a barrel goes in there, it's in there indefinitely.
Now, is that more for blending and consistency, like you said, versus pulling
Yeah,
more?
it is. I mean, it is, you're blending, but it's the same recipes. It's not a blended whiskey, obviously. It's a bourbon whiskey. But it's all the same. 91 is all the same recipe. It is a combination of both 4 chars and 3 chars with a toast, because when we barrel, each batch is 50-50, 4 chars and 3 chars with a toast. So it allows those barrels to commingle and pick up the different nuances from each other. And yeah, I mean, it even creates its own little taste profile. But that barrel just evolves over time and becomes more complex over time.
Sure. So you're not just using the one single barrel by itself. It's with others of its kind, more or less.
Right.
That's cool.
Yep.
So for you personally, what was it like when you went from using the LDI sourced bourbon to putting out your own bourbon that you've made?
It was the scariest thing we've ever done. And it was the best thing we've ever done. We truly ripped the Band-Aid, because when we finally built a distillery, which was the experimental distillery, we didn't lay down anything that was the same thing really as 1816. We had already just decided right then and there that 1816, that LDI recipe was not going to be our future. And so we went down the path of exploring specialty malts day one. So there was no fallback plan. It was one of these recipes is going to work out for us, and that's just how it's going to be. And we ended up building a 50,000 square foot distillery 2 years after that, just with the confidence that one of these recipes is going to be our flagship and we're going to scale it up. So it was a huge risk compared to, compared to a lot of other things that you see in the industry. And we ripped the Band-Aid on both the product and the package at the same time. August of 2019, 1816 package, 1816 product was out, and Chattanooga Whiskey 91 and 111 were in.
So 1816 is no more.
No, you can get. We have some leftover bottles that we'll sell out of our gift shop, but other than that, no, we haven't sold it in a year and a half. So.
Oh wow! So it's all 91 now.
Yep,
that's great.
Yeah, we scaled up about a dozen other recipes from the experimental distillery to Riverfront, which 99 rye came from that as well, which is a malted rye, and we've got Bottled and Bond that's coming out. That's a combination of different recipes, but 91 and 111 are our flagships.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Can you kind of go into some of like the experimental bottles that you guys have done, and also for you in your position as founder, like what is your level of creative control? I mean, how much input do you have to your master distiller where you're saying, hey, like, let's try this out. This sounds cool. Or is he going to you with his ideas?
Oh, he beats me up all the time. That's what's cool about we're still, 100% independently, locally owned. And we don't have, there's no outside influence. It's 100% collaboration, team collaboration. Grant's passion is, R&D and creativity. But he's got also a great distilling team with a lot of great ideas too. So I would say more times than not, it's Grant and the distilling team coming to me and the marketing team and saying, hey, we've got these concepts. And the marketing, we sign off on everything. I don't think there's anything we've really shot down yet. But that's the beauty of the experimental distillery is it's pretty low risk. And it's a barrel, 2 barrels, 3 barrels or something. And it always sells and sells out. And we've done over 320 experimental barrels. We've released over 35 experimental, batches / single barrels since August of 2017. And like I said, we scaled up about a dozen of those recipes to Riverfront. But we haven't done anything at Riverfront that wasn't inspired by something at the experimental distillery. So we explore it at the experimental distillery, and then we can decide whether or not we want to scale it up at Riverfront.
Anything that's done particularly well from the experimental side that you would consider releasing more on a full-time basis, or is that more of a, once it's out, and sorry if you missed it?
It's definitely, as far as experimental batch is concerned, or anything, when we release it out of the experimental, once it's done. Sorry you missed it. But and that's kind of what makes that place special. Sure. Is when you go there, if you have an opportunity to buy or taste an experimental, then that's history in the making. It's gone, and or it will be gone. So we've done some things beyond the dozen recipes, that I'm really excited about, that I hope we can scale at some point in time. We've done some liqueurs. We had a coffee liqueur that was just, incredible. We did a fig Amaro liqueur that was incredible. Those two just recently came out and sold out instantly because they were so good. And they were high proof too. 70 to 80 proof for a liqueur is high, obviously. So, and they were high malt bourbon base, minimum 2 years, 2 to 3 years aged. And so super high quality, super unique and super tasty. And I'd love to be able to scale them. But, 91 and 111, these are the recipes, 99 rye. I mean, there's a pretty significant demand for them. And so we're just trying to keep up with supply there.
Does the 91 and 111, are those the same mash bill, and you pull them out and
Yes.
proof it? They are. So
Yes.
do you proof what's it go into the barrel at?
115.
And then do you proof it to the 91
Yes.
or to the 111? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, proof it to 91. We proved it to 111 because we needed a cask proof that we were capable of hitting on a regular basis, and that's why it's at 111.
Gotcha. Okay. Can you take me through these? So I've got the 91 and the 111 here.
Yeah.
Kind of talk about just these particularly with, flavor profiles or anything particularly that people should be looking out for when they get an opportunity to try it.
Yeah. So, with 91 and 111, because again, the same recipe, in 111, the specialty malts are going to stand up even more than 91, but they're both going to be malt forward bourbons. And so you'll have a lot of people that'll be like, oh yeah, I get it. It's a malty bourbon. And, a lot of people seemingly love it. And there's some people out there that don't like a malty bourbon. But the reviews have been awesome. And it really is just a darker roast. It's like a dark roast coffee, right? Or it's like it's like dark chocolate versus milk chocolate. You have a lot of people that prefer milk chocolate versus dark chocolate. I don't know why you would, but
yeah.
But no,
psycho thing.
it's designed to be an approachable bourbon, though. It's designed if you want to mix it in old fashioned. If you want to have a whiskey ginger, that's great. It's a great. It's a bourbon. Mm-hmm. But the Tennessee high malt aspect is going to create some like darker, kind of roasty or toasty notes. So imagine like honey covered toast, or graham cracker. There's a graham cracker note in there that I think is pretty prominent. And then, you've got maybe if it's fruit, might be a little bit of dried apricot. So I know there's a hint of fruit in there that kind of expresses it that way. You're gonna get a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of butterscotch, some of those classic bourbon notes for sure. The butterscotch note and almost chocolate note stands up big time in 111. And that's like a dessert bourbon compared to 91.
I'm not good about getting chocolate out of bourbon. I don't know what it is. That's just something I just don't ever tend to get out of bourbon. This one I get a definite chocolate out of this.
Yeah, it's a very popular tasty note on that. And that's those specialty malts going to work, as well as all the other tactics we do around it. It's long cold fermentation, barrel entry, all that stuff.
Sure.
So yeah, and the 91 proof it's an approachable bourbon. That's why it's proof to 91. It's an easy sipper. It's a medium bodied. It's a, medium finish. And that's all versus 111, where it's big bodied and long lasting finish and lots of texture. And,
I didn't get I didn't get that like hit from the proof though on the 111. Because I feel like there's a lot of
there's so many things that go into the distilling process that can make a product more approachable overall. Mm-hmm. And of course, the recipe again is the foundation. But I think a long cold fermentation is a secret that makes you got to put the time in, but that makes for a product to be more approachable, not quite as astringent.
Is the 7-day fermentation, is that significantly cooler than the 3 or 4 day?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah. Oh yeah. By probably 20 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. This 111's, the mouthfeel is definitely different. I see what you're saying about like the approachable, feel from that 91. It's really nice to sip on. I had to try it first before we jumped on here because I was on one last week and it was like my first sip of the day at 11 a.m. and I didn't respond favorably with my first sip, but I really like that. And then that 111's outstanding. Awesome. The mouthfeel on that's incredible.
Awesome. Thanks.
So are you guys open right now with the distillery? You guys do any tours or anything like that?
We are. We reduced capacity back when the pandemic hit. We shut down during the overall shutdown for 2 months, and then we opened back up at about a quarter capacity, and we haven't operated at greater than probably a third or max a half capacity since we opened back up. But it's doing really well. There's a lot of people that are driving to Chattanooga or driving through Chattanooga. A lot of people that are coming up just to take the tour, and even at a very reduced capacity, we're seeing some great success out there.
That's great. It's well deserved, man. This is really good whiskey. I really enjoy it.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
What's expansion wise? What's it look like for you guys in terms of getting some bottles out Arizona way? Not for myself personally,
yeah,
but just people. Just distribution or moving forward.
So we were in 12 states in 2020. We'll be in 14 in 2021. We're really just kind of filling out the Southeast and the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And our demand is pretty significant. So it's going to be, while we have a larger craft distillery, we just need to make sure that we can take care of these markets.
Sure.
So it'll probably be a little while before we expand beyond these 14 states. So if you want to, if now we are on Sealbox, or you can go through our website,
mm-hmm.
go through ChattanoogaWhiskey.com, and there's an online portal in there that ships to, I think, 28 states.
Oh, okay.
So you can go through there and buy. Hopefully they ship, to whoever's listening state. And otherwise, it's Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Kentucky, and Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Illinois, and Ohio. And then we are opening Indiana and Louisiana in the next month.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's starting to expand. So people that are traveling around out there will definitely find a opportunity to get their hands on some bottles, I think.
Yeah, be awesome.
Any interesting expressions coming out in the near future that you would like to get people excited about?
Yeah, Tawny Port. So we're doing a barrel finishing series in the first release, and it'll be an annual thing. It'll be an annual release, and it'll go into distribution. The first one is Tawny Port, and that comes out next month. And then in summer, we are releasing our Bottled and Bond, and that is not just one recipe. It's not even the 91 or 111 recipe. It is actually a combination of 4 different recipes that we scaled up from the experimental distillery. So there's 2 vintages per year. There's a spring vintage and fall vintage every year. So,
wow, that's really interesting.
Yep.
Will that go to everywhere that you guys have distribution at?
Yes, it'll be limited, but yes.
That's awesome. Well, where can people find Chattanooga Whiskey on social media?
We're most active on Instagram. So if you go check us out at Instagram /@chatwhiskey. That's 2 T's. Also, we're on Facebook or Twitter, even though we don't really do anything with Twitter. We used to, but not anymore. And then but I would say, hit us up at Facebook or Instagram. Go to our website. If you want to read up on all of our experimental releases, we keep all that stuff up to date. There's a lot of great information on our website. Our newsletter too. You can subscribe to our newsletter on our website. We're really strategic with our newsletter. We don't just send out like promotional deals all the time. It's when we're generally doing product releases that we send out a newsletter. And so yeah. And then of course come to the experimental distillery. It's an amazing experience, and Chattanooga is an amazing town.
Yeah. They got to get some people out there, man. That'd be awesome. I need to, I'm out that way. I need to come by and check that place out. It seems really cool. So Tim, thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your knowledge about this, not only the whiskey itself, but being able to share the history of the brand. It's really awesome.
Well, you seem like you have a lot of knowledge about bourbon yourself. So appreciate the questions, and thanks for reaching out. And yeah, I've enjoyed talking with you, Tony. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim.